100 of Vic's finest.
Indeed.
I started sipping my wine already.
Good for you.
Me too.
I suspect others have joined you and jolly good. So I think we're probably, we'll have some other people joining us as we go along, but we're up to over 80. So I think we'll get started. So welcome everyone. Welcome to this cheese event. If I can ask you to just mute your microphones, that way we'll get the best sound quality. I'm sure you all know the drill by now. My name's Louise Yearwood. I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs and Advancement for Victoria University in the University of Toronto. I imagine we have a number of Vic grads with us this evening, so welcome to you, and also a number of U of T grads. Welcome to you as well, because I know we put this event on the Alumni Hub for U of T as well. So a warm welcome to all of you. Just to let you know, this is being recorded. Also, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat and we'll be able to make sure that Lisa gets those questions and she's able to answer them for you. So to start us off, I'd like to give a land acknowledgement, even though we're not presently on campus, and I wish we were, but on the other hand, this kind of format allows us to engage a lot of people from all over the place. So I'm glad that we're able to do this. But as we are not on campus, I would like to acknowledge the sacred land on which Victoria University operates and to pay respect to those who came before us. The site on which the university stands has been a site of human activity for many thousands of years. It's the territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to study, live, love, and work in the community and on this territory. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Lisa McAlpine, our guest speaker tonight. She's a Vic alum from the class of '83, and she's an expert in New World, Old World, and artisanal cheeses. She has mastered her art over many years and has earned a variety of certifications in the field. She's the owner of Artisan Cheese Marketing and Cheese Education Guild, and acts as a cheese consultant and trainer in cheese knowledge to industry and food professionals. Lisa is the current trainer of the first Cheese Appreciation Certification Program in Canada, which was established in 2005. And she's trained over 100 staff from stores like Longo's and Fortino's, and has presented seminars on cheese knowledge and appreciation in collaboration with the Dairy Farmers of Canada. Lisa's cheese appreciation and mastery programs are specifically designed for retail and food industry staff to develop their expertise, to educate their palate, and to build excitement around the styles, regions, and histories of the world's new and old world cheeses. On a personal note, Lisa has been a friend of mine for many years, and I am forever grateful to her for introducing me to my favorite cheese, which is called Beemster Goat. And if any of you haven't tried it, I recommend it. So it is my particular pleasure to be able to welcome Lisa this evening. Lisa, we're thrilled to have you with us, and I will pass things over to you.
Thanks, Louise. I was wondering what I recommended. I was trying to think, what was it that I recommended? Beemster Goat is wonderful for breakfast. I will tell everybody that. It's a great cheese to have with toast and tea. Anyway, it's great to be a part of this gathering. I've put together some slides so that you don't have to look at me for an hour or 45 minutes or however long this is. So we'll have a bit of fun with the slides because it's always fun to see something up in front of you rather than just listening to it. So I think, Helena, if we can go to the first slide.
Yep, we'll do that right now.
And then we'll have our visual. Okay, let's go to the next one, please. That's the box there.
Oh,
Just go back one.
hang on, it won't let me go back. Just give me half a second. Sorry, folks. Do you want to start with the milk one?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Over to
All
you.
right, so there's the visual. So milk is the major component in cheese. There's various different ruminants that it can be milked to produce cheese. But the visual that I have on the first screen is that milk is hard cow milk cheese is made up of 10 liters of milk to produce 1 kilo of hard cheese. So the visual before was also, whenever I did my talks with Dairy Farmers of Canada, I'd always say, if you remember back to your nursery rhyme, Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. The curds are the solid part, and the whey is the liquid part in the process of cheese making. So the 10 liters of milk to make 1 kilo of hard cheese, something along the lines of a Gouda, that would be cow milk. Obviously different animals, sheep, goat, water buffalo, they all have different fat contents in their milk. So the ratio would be slightly different for depending on the type of animal. So in the world, annually, there's over 22 billion kilos of cheese produced annually. And more than 22 billion kilos of cheese produced, and more than 1/3 of the world's milk is consumed as cheese. Canada is the 5th largest producer. So then I put together some fun cheese facts just to kind of brighten things up a bit. As you probably know, it's one of mankind's oldest foods. It appeals to all ages, depending on whether you're, a young person, starting out on craft singles, or a little bit more sophisticated older person, enjoying your English Stilton. So it appeals to all ages, and it crosses every economic group. It offers unlimited variety, and it's a concentrated source of nutrition in our diets. Typically, in years gone by, cheese would be made by farming wives or farming women in order to preserve the milk, the excess milk. So they would create cheese as a concentrated source of protein for their diets. And for many years, cheese was the main component of a peasant's diet, because that was what would be eaten at lunch with bread. And then with the advent of industrialization, salaries increased, and meat became more popular. So back in the day, it was mainly cheese as the main protein source. In Canada, we produce over 1,400 different types of cheese from east to west coast. There's approximately 10,000 dairy farms in Canada, the majority of which are located in Quebec and Ontario. This is a fun fact. On average, Canadians consume 14.65 kilos of cheese per person per year. That's based on a 2018 figure. With the pandemic and COVID, I mean, it might have gone up. I don't know. People are a lot closer to their fridges now than before the pandemic. You might think it would be the French that would consume the most cheese, but it's actually the Greeks. They consume the most cheese at about 31 kilos per person per year. Just a kind of an interesting twist. Cheddar and mozzarella are the most produced cheeses in Canada, and in fact in North America. And, you know, cheddar makes sense because Canadians know their cheddar, but the mozzarella is produced in vast quantities because pizza is such a popular, popular food that people buy. And the cheese that they use for pizzas is generally industrial produced, and they call it pizza mozz. Back in 1864, the first cooperative cheddar factory in Canada was opened in Ingersoll, Ontario, which is part of the Oxford County kind of dairy capital of Ontario. And we'll be talking about the Five Brothers from Guns Hill, which is from that region of Ontario just a bit later. I put in a picture of this mammoth cheese, 22,000 pound cheddar. It was made back in the late 1800s in the town of Perth, and it was put on display in Chicago to promote Canadian cheddar. There was actually a bit of an accident there. It was very, very hot and the floor collapsed underneath, but they were able to save about 300 pounds that went back to Perth to the cheesemakers there. And the rest was all sold in England, which was interesting because Canada was one of the major producers for export of cheddar to England, which is kind of an interesting fact. So now we'll go on, Helena, please, to the next one, next slide. So there's 4 main ingredients in natural cheese. And if you think of all the cheeses that you see in the store or that you love to eat, there are 4 basic ingredients to all cheese. Milk from whatever ruminant is chosen with that cheesemaker. Salt, starter culture, which is bacteria that's added to the milk to bring about the fermentation, and enzymes where the curds are separated from the whey. So if you think about everything from, you know, cream cheese or Boursin to Stilton to bloomy rind soft bries to cheddars, goat milk cheddars, sheep milk cheddars, the actual 4 ingredients are the same throughout all those different varieties. So what actually needs to happen, these different, there's cheese, there's aging facilities, there's different ways to handle the curd, there's different molds or penicillium bacteriums that are sprayed on the outside of the cheeses. So it's kind of an odd fact, but there are 4 things that go into every cheese, and then you have all these different varieties. It's incredible. So I put in a little quote here. Milk is the sum total of what an animal has eaten in the past few hours. One of the things I want to kind of, if I can convey this in my talk tonight, is that what the cheesemakers actually do by turning the milk into cheese, it's magic. It's absolutely, it's alchemy. And if you think about what's in that milk, it is exactly what the animal has eaten in the past few hours. From animal to animal, from field to field, and from farm to farm, the milk will differ. From milk, we make an incredible array of foods, from butter to yogurt to cheese. Each of these comes in a myriad of forms, all of which are subtly influenced and informed by the specific geographical and biological conditions of the farm where that milk was made. It's actually really important to think about the terroir, the land, the sunshine, the climate, what the animal eats, where it grazes, in order to understand what actually comes in the milk to then be turned into cheese. If you think about goats and sheep, goats are foraging animals. They will live in very kind of sparse conditions. They were actually the first animals, along with sheep, to be domesticated long before cows, which require a lot of water and a lot of pasture. So goats, by whatever they eat, will go into their milk. So if they're eating, you know, bark, or they're eating soil, or they're eating whatever, it ends up in the milk. So it's very, very interesting to kind of see what actually comes out of that that journey that the goat takes. So I just wanted to try and make that link, that the 4 ingredients are incredibly common, and then a number of cheeses, you know, thousands of cheeses come in from cheesemakers in different ways, and the milk is also inconsistent as it comes in. So I don't know if that's probably not as clear as it could be, but I kind of got a bit sidetracked on that. Anyway, we'll go to the next slide, please, Helena. The quick tips to sense and to evaluate your cheese. So one of the reasons that we're having the tasting tonight, or there's some lovely boxes that some of you have been able to pick up of the 4 cheeses that I chose for tonight. And what I'd like to convey is that when you taste cheese, if you're doing it seriously or even for fun, but you actually want to taste it rather than just eat it, it's always really, really important to go slowly. When we do cheese tastings in class, it's always done in silence. And this is something that there's a number of us that took a course in France a few years ago with one of the great affineur houses, Mons Fromage, in the Auvergne in France. And it was very technical course, but they insisted that we did our notes and our tastings and our perceptions in silence, because if you can't really figure out what you're tasting, you got to close your eyes and think about it. If somebody says, you know, that's asparagus, or someone else says that's cauliflower, it may kind of trigger you to think that. And what that ends up doing is it may be that's exactly what you're tasting, but then you don't have a lot of confidence in what you're perceiving. So certainly when we do the retail training, I try and make sure that the trainees are all trying to figure it out for themselves, because they have to then portray it to the customer behind the counter, their knowledge, and they have to feel solid in their knowledge. So proceed slowly, take note of what you see, smell, and taste. And as I say in my Dairy Farmers of Canada seminars, you get to play with your food. The bread that's usually out, or crackers, is usually with a tasting, a palate cleanser, rather than making a sandwich. Usually in tastings, we have a lot of water as well. So it helps. So look at the cheese, look at its shape, its color, its rind, whether it's beating up. That's something that you'll notice in a sheep milk cheese, and we don't have one of those tonight. But if you were to purchase a Pecorino Romano or any sheep milk cheese, and you were to bring it out 45 minutes ahead before you're tasting it, you'd see that the fat will start to bead up to the surface. That's always a tell with when you're doing blind tastings. If you see that beading coming up on the side of the cheese, that it's actually generally a sheep milk cheese, because the fat content's so high. It's really good to pick it up, play with your cheese, feel it. For instance, the first cheese that we're going to try tonight, which is a washed rind cheese, the one that's has the white rind and the orange, it's very velvety to feel, but on some of the orange parts of the rind, you can feel it's quite tacky. So look at it, smell the cheese, try and figure out what it's telling you. You may be smelling ammonia on the surface. Certainly washed rind cheeses, like the first cheese tonight, is very, very, can be very off-putting. The aroma that comes from washed rind cheeses can often be much stronger than the actual flavor of the cheese. So it's very, very good to smell the cheese first before you taste it, see what it communicates to you. Smell is the most important factor, along with taste, that creates flavor. So that may be a bit, you have to kind of separate taste from flavor. So when we're tasting a cheese, the most important sense in tasting the cheese is your sense of smell. You'll get a hit kind of at the back of your throat that will communicate something to your brain. These are called organoleptic qualities, and it will communicate something to your brain, and then that will in turn tell you or give you a hint of what you may be perceiving. And we all taste differently. So there's nothing, really, there's nothing wrong with anything that you perceive. And that's why we like to have people kind of do this in silence, or at least try and feel comfortable with what they're perceiving. There are people in our society that are called super tasters, and they're non-tasters, and they're tasters. And you don't want to be a super taster. A super taster can detect bitter when I wouldn't even detect bitter. So super tasters are never part of cheese judging groups. Actually, I did a course years ago at American Cheese Society at their conference on judging, and the Australian fellow who was teaching the course, he was basically saying with the teams that he puts together, never has a super taster on it, more women than men, because women apparently taste better than men, and the older, and not too old. And also all the tastings are in the morning. So I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting little fact. So once you've smelled the cheese and then you put the cheese in your mouth, instead of just chewing it up and swallowing it down, there are no taste receptors in your teeth. Play with it in your mouth. Let it swish around over your tongue, put it on the roof of your mouth. Let it linger before you actually swallow it, and you'll be able to perceive kind of subtle qualities and predominant qualities. Like I'm actually, one of the things that I'm doing during this pandemic is I thought, you know, why don't I go back and learn what I've learned before, but in a different way. So there's four of us that have signed up for the George Brown Professional Fromager course. And we had a Pecorino Romano a couple of weeks ago that was so salty. It was so salty. The top of our mouth was just, you know, almost puckering. But you will notice something, the predominant quality of a cheese, like a salt in a Pecorino, will kind of come to mind immediately once you kind of breathe in and you see the subtleties in your palate.
So whilst
yeah.
people are just rolling the cheese around in their mouth,
good.
we do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I thought I'd just bring up.
Sure.
So the first question was from someone was, what kind of cheese typically would be in a ploughman's lunch?
Oh, so ploughman's lunch would be exactly what it sounds like. So there would always, well, from my knowledge, there would always be a cheddar. There's usually a blue cheese, and quite often there's a soft bloomy cheese. Then there's always pickles, and there's always a little bit of salad and bread.
Yes, and sometimes ham.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go back to England. I really want. There's a kind of that whole area of Somerset down towards, you know, the southwest.
Yes.
just
Somerset
cheddar,
cheese, lovely.
cheddar and cider, and oh my gosh, so yeah.
Okay,
That's
and
what I
then
would
next question is, why are some of the shapes of cheese different? And is there a particular reason why certain cheeses are in certain shapes?
I think a lot of it is to do with tradition. If you think about, for instance, comparing a brie to a camembert, camembert is made in a smaller wheel. Bries are made in a much larger wheel. That affects how the cheeses ripen. Those cheeses ripen from the outside to the inside. So a larger diameter brie wheel would take longer to develop. You couldn't make, let's think, if you were to think of a truckle of Stilton or cheddar, a wheel of cheddar, you couldn't make a soft cheese with that kind of height. So I think the answer to that would be mainly tradition, and just kind of ease of, it's evolved to that, to being that way. Some cheeses they have bark around the outside, some have leaves, some have herbs. It's all kind of what the cheesemaker has evolved to make it, how it's made that way.
Okay, thank you. And just, there seems to be, there's a little bit of a few questions in the chat from people who aren't sure if they should be eating right now, and if so, which cheese is it they should be trying?
Oh, okay. Let me just see. Well, yeah, I've gone through everything pretty much on evaluating cheese. So let's go on to the next slide then, please, Helena. And we'll start with Le Bon Secret. So I chose 4 cheeses for this evening from Ontario Cheesemakers. I chose 4 different types, categories, styles of cheese. They're all cow milk. And when one puts together a cheese board, you usually start with the mildest cheese and go towards the strongest. So you would always have blue or flavored cheeses last, and then soft or milder cheeses first. Typically, I would start a tasting with not a washed rind cheese as this Bon Secret is, but I would maybe start with a more of a soft bloomy cheese. But this is a really very mild cheese, which actually has some components of a bloomy rind cheese and a washed rind cheese that's kind of interesting to discuss. So this would be the first cheese to try. I guess I did put on the tasting notes to take your cheeses out of the refrigerator kind of 45 minutes to an hour ahead. Let it start to breathe and warm up. Chocolate, try something that's chocolate when very cold. You can't kind of get the nuances of it because the fat and the oil in it is so solid. So okay, I'm actually getting these questions in front of me. Can you explain the different types of rinds? Okay, so I can, definitely. Some cheeses don't have rinds. For instance, if you think of a brined feta, there's no rind. The first cheese that we're trying tonight is Le Bon Secret, which is a washed rind cheese, which means that the cheesemaker has taken the cheese and they've put it in the curds in the form, and they've drained it. And then they've sprayed what's called Brevibacterian linens on the outside of the cheese. And that creates that orangey, tacky, kind of smelly, aromatic rind, which the rind protects the inside of the cheese, and it creates kind of a living layer that helps to move from the outside to the inside to ripen the cheese. So if you were to think of a brie or a camembert, those rinds are soft, bloomy rinds. They're made with the Penicillium camemberti is sprayed on the outside of the cheese, and that creates that velvety rind. The second cheese that we're going to try tonight, the Five Brothers, has a natural rind, and that rind is created with washing. The cheesemaker washes the outside of the cheese wheel with a solution. And then the Gouda has a wax rind. It actually has a rind that's created before they put the wax on. So, but the wax is food grade wax, which just kind of protects the cheese as it's aging. And then the final cheese, the Celtic Blue, also has a natural rind, which you can see on the, any of you that have it, you can see that the outside of the cheese is quite, it's quite, what's the word, striated. It's actually, that cheese is aged in a plastic form, and so you can actually see the grooves in it. Questions come up, how do you know what rinds you can eat? So in my seminars, I basically, you can eat whatever rinds are appeal to you, except for the wax. It's food grade wax. It will not hurt you. You won't die. And you can really eat whatever rinds you see. Like for tonight, I wouldn't eat the wax on the cumin Gouda, but all the other rinds you can eat. If you take a piece of, for instance, the Five Brothers that we have tonight, the second cheese, if you take a piece of that and you taste the paste in the middle of the slice, and then you taste it closer to the rind, and then you taste it with the rind, you'll actually have 3 different tastes. So it's all depending on your preference, but basically there aren't any rinds that you cannot eat. Some of the very, very old Spanish blue cheeses are really not, you don't really want to eat those leaves that are on the outside. Somebody asked, what is the purpose of the red pepper jelly? That's just an accompaniment to add to your flavor. The red pepper jelly is a great condiment to go with cheese. It just kind of enhances the flavor. Okay, so I'll just talk a bit briefly about Le Bon Secret. Albert's Leap is a brand that Quality Cheese uses for some of their more European cheeses. Albert Bourgault is one of 4 brothers. They're 4th generation cheesemakers in Vaughan, up at Highway 7 and Weston Road areas where their plant is. And then they make amazing Italian style cheeses in Canada. Ricotta, their bocconcini, they've got buffalo, water buffalo bocconcinis, they've got all kinds of Italian cheeses. And then they opened a plant in Orangeville, I guess maybe 5 years ago now, and that's their Bloomy Rind plant. And I talked to Albert the other day about this Le Bon Secret, and I said, like, what's the deal with this mixed rind? Because it's got the white and it's got the washed rind. And he goes, Lisa, it's a washed rind cheese. It's not a mixed rind. I said, yeah, but look at the picture, and look at the cheese. He goes, yeah, but you know, we make it in the Bloomy Rind plant, and there's so much bloom in the air, it just kind of naturally just populates the washed rind. So it's kind of a mixed rind, but they actually technically call it a washed rind cheese. It's made with pasteurized milk, and they have pasteurized cream that's also been added to it. So that makes, because the cheese has been enriched with cream, that makes it a double cream. And you can see on the packaging, the description of it. You'll see 28% MF, and that's milk fat, and then 52% moisture. I can't see the whole question there. Sorry, Louise, you're going to have to tell me what that whole question was.
Yeah, I'll read the whole thing. It says, what is the Pulitzer Prize winning writer Michael Moss wrote Salt, Sugar, Fat in 2014 and said cheese production really soared when skim milk became popular for health reasons. We consume more cheese than ever now as part of using up the butter fat left after skimming it off milk. please comment.
I'm not sure that I would totally agree with that, but I wouldn't want to counter a Pulitzer Prize writer. I'm not sure that I can answer that, actually. I think I would say that cheese making, certainly in Canada, has taken a big hit with the pandemic. I wouldn't say that it has leapt ahead because of the use of skim milk. There's traditional cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano that's been made with skim milk for centuries. It's also a raw milk cheese that's causes a lot of controversy with some people. But I'm sorry, but I don't think I can really kind of pinpoint the answer to that question. Yeah, he probably was. Sorry, the chat came up saying it was industrial production. I'm sure that would be true. As industrialization came about, and as Britain stopped bringing in the imports from Canada of cheddar, there were thousands of factories, cheese factories, that shut in Ontario alone because the demand for the cheddar was no longer there. But then with the advent of craft and some of the large four that we have in Canada now, with the advent of the industrial production, it's very, very hard for some of these cheesemakers, smaller cheesemakers, to survive, because they're using smaller herds. They're farmstead cheeses where they produce the milk and the feed on their farm, and then they make the cheese on the farm as well. What a lot of farmers will do is put a couple of Jersey cows in amongst the herd of Holsteins, and that brings up the fat content in the milk. Sorry, I'm getting off topic, but anyway, sorry, industrial versus artisanal. I think industrial production really hurt a lot of the artisans, and certainly a lot of the trade deals that have been negotiated over the last few years between Canada and the US and Europe, and it's really hurt our artisanal cheesemakers quite a bit. But that said, when I was talking to Albert the other day, he said that the farming communities, the dairy cattle herds are just going gangbusters in the pandemic, and the cheesemakers are struggling. But in talking to Jeremy Lago at the pantry, he's never been busier than during this pandemic. So it's kind of sorry, again, I'm digressing off onto the pandemic versus industrial cheese production. Sorry about that. I don't really think I can answer completely that question. Sorry, I got a bit.
No, that's no problem, Lisa. And that's really interesting, the idea of industrial and how that has affected things. And certainly, I'm sure our artisanal cheesemakers are struggling for sure.
Well,
I don't know if you saw, there's another question that's come in about cheddar from unpasteurized milk. Is that still available? Actually, I was wondering about the difference between pasteurized and unpasteurized as well.
Okay, so always a good thing to discuss. So milk can be treated in 3 different ways. It can be left raw in cheese production. It can be thermalized, which means that it's taken up to, I think it's 52 degrees Celsius for 10 seconds. And then it's cooled and then made into cheese. Thermalized milk is very, very common with the Quebec cheesemakers. It does take out some of the scary pathogens that pasteurization takes out. But in Canada, thermalized cheeses and raw milk cheeses have to be aged 60 days before they can be sold. So you will see, you'll rarely see made with raw milk on a cheese label, but you may see unpasteurized. And if you see unpasteurized, it still has to be aged 60 days before it can be sold. So if you, for instance, any of those soft, very moist cheeses like bocconcini, ricotta, they're all made with pasteurized milk, because those are cheeses that are made, packaged and sold like basically the same day. They can be made, packaged and sold the same day. So anything that's pasteurized can go out right away. But so of the cheeses today, the Five Brothers is pasteurized. That's the second cheese. The Gouda that we're having, the cumin aged Gouda, is thermalized. And the Celtic Blue is pasteurized. So, so yes, you can buy raw milk cheeses in Canada, and you will see unpasteurized milk on some labels. So this one's pasteurized. The picture on the screen, if you can look at that smaller triangle on the right, you'll see how it almost looks like there's something solid in the middle, and it's a really good example of how this cheese ripens. So these small formed cheeses where they have a sort of an alive rind on the outside, they ripen from the outside to the inside, and you can see that that cheese is very, very runny under the rind, but it's sort of solid in the middle. So before COVID, in my classes, I would always tell people, like, if you're going to the store and you're going to buy one of those boxes of camembert, take the lid off before you buy it and put your thumb in the, don't poke it really, really hard, but put your thumb in the middle of the wheel and see if it has some give to it. And that, if it's soft in the center, it means that it's ripened all the way through. If it's still firm in the center, or sort of firm, it means that it's still ripening. So if you cut into that cheese before it's runny right to the center, which may be the way you like it, but if you cut into the cheese before it's fully ripened to the center, it will not continue ripening. Just an interesting side effect. So, or side note. So these cheeses, the Bon Secret, are a double cream. It's been enriched with cream. It's a wash rind cheese. The cheesemaker washes it with a brine solution, which adds salt. It starts to create this live culture on the outside. Bee linens, Brevibacterian linens, are what cause that orange color to grow on the outside. You'll find with a lot of the washed rind cheeses like Oka or some of the really good Quebec washed rind cheeses, you'll start to feel or you'll smell like dirty feet or wet feet. It's actually a true aroma because Brevibacterian linens are on our feet too. So just a little side note, but get past the aroma and try the cheese because it will not be as strong as the aroma. And so I just wanted to, one of the side things that I do in my work life is I, along with my colleague Debbie Levy, we're the co-superintendents Royal Butter each year, which is really, really fun. It's been so fun to try and develop the competition across Canada, both butter and cheese. So this Bon Secret was winner in the washed rind category in this past year in 2020. We actually did hold the competition at the Brampton Fairgrounds with all kinds of COVID protocols. It was pretty crazy, but anyway, this is a winner. Yeah, so somebody said sometimes there's a sort of barnyard smell to certain cheeses, which is actually rather appealing. So yeah, you want some cheeses, you'll smell barn, there's a dirty barn and then there's a clean barn when we start kind of our aromas. But yeah, the barn, and you'll smell hay. Yeah, this course that I'm taking now, the lady who's instructing or teaching the class, she's saying, you know, when you go out into the country in the summers, like smell the hay, smell the wet hay, you know, what is a stone, take a clean stone and taste the stone and see what it, anyway, trying to describe what all these flavors are. So we'll move on to the next slide, Helena, which is the Five Brothers. So Five Brothers is produced at Guns Hill Artisan Cheese, which is located just off the highway near Woodstock, Ontario, which is the dairy capital of, well, Oxford County is the dairy capital of Ontario. And Shep Yasselstein is the fellow down in the middle. He's like, he looks like he's 12 years old, but he's actually like 30 something. He's crazy nice. And he studied in the Finger Lakes in New York, in New York State, in British Columbia, and then in Switzerland. And he uses the milk from his family farm. It was his grandfather who emigrated in the 1950s from Holland. And they used the milk from the family farm, and he studied cheese making, and he brought it back, and he's become the owner of the Artisan cheese company as part of the farm. So the Five Brothers you'll see up in the top left, and it doesn't really look like the rind that we have on the cheese here, but it is the same. And there are five brothers. There's one brother and the father that still run the farm, and the other brothers do something else, but Shep is the main, well, he's the cheesemaker. So if you pick up your piece of Five Brothers, or cut off a piece, I don't know if you can see mine, have a bit of the rind, and then you've got the piece of cheese there. So smell the paste. It's actually quite buttery. And then if you smell the rind, it's kind of, there's a minerality, there's a difference. There's a minerality to the rind. You can eat this rind. You may not want to. You can see how there's a different color just underneath the rind. It's kind of a, well, the paste is ivory, and then it's a darker kind of gray ivory under the rind, and that's just the ripening process and what happens. This has been a really, really popular cheese with consumers, and everybody sort of loves this cheese. It's very rare to find kind of Swiss style cheeses in Ontario. There's two cheesemakers that do them really well. This one, Guns Hill, and there's another one in another cheesemaker in St. Mary's, just past Stratford, called Stonetown, and they're from Switzerland, and they're very, very successful with their sort of Swiss style cheeses. This Five Brothers is a combination of Gouda and Appenzeller. It's made in large wheels. And it's aged about 8 months. They make them in 4 to 6 kilo wheels. Shep always wins at the Royal Winter Fair and the Dairy Farmers Cheese Grand Prix, Canadian Cheese Grand Prix. This cheese is quite amazing for, it's a Swiss style cheese, as I said, for Ontario. He also has another cheese that's aged longer. It's made slightly differently, called Handeck. When he first named the cheese, he called it Handegg, which was the name of the town in Switzerland where he learned his cheese making craft. And people were really, really kind of worried that there was egg in the cheese. And so he ended up changing it to Handeck, but there's another digression. So it has a very rich paste, and I think you'll be able to taste some sweet notes in it as well. He's very, very accomplished cheesemaker, so I hope you like that one. That was kind of an interesting, when Jeremy and I kind of talked about what cheeses to include in the box, this was always one that is quite popular. They have cedar wooden planks that they age the cheeses on in the aging room. And there was a big controversy with American Cheese Society a few years ago. They said that they really thought that there was too much bacteria growing on the wooden boards, and so they were going to ban cheesemakers from aging their cheese on the wooden boards. And so all the cheesemakers had to band together and say, no, really, you don't know what you're talking about. And so it was pretty good. They kind of backtracked and turned around, and they're able to age their cheeses on wooden boards now. So it's good to have a good lobbying group. We're trying to bring back the Ontario Cheese Society, but so far we haven't been able to accomplish that yet. So we'll move on to the next slide, please, Helena, the Mountain Oak Gouda.
Lisa, sorry, just there's a quick question on how do you get graininess in the texture of the cheese?
If you're detecting graininess in the Five Brothers, I'm not so sure that that's maybe should be there. I don't want to taste and talk because I won't be able to do both.
Yeah.
Really won't. When I'm teaching, I never taste. This next cheese that we're going to try will have some crystals in it, and I can talk about tyrosine crystals. They're like a bit of a crunch that you find in aged Goudas. Graininess, you can see graininess in a cheddar if you break it up, and that's just the curd formation. But maybe we need to know whether the graininess was found in the Five Brothers or not. I guess it's all a technique as well. The cheesemaker uses. So until we hear from that person again, I guess we'll move on to the cumin aged Gouda. So Adam van Verheek, and I apologize if there's any people that are Dutch in the audience. I may not have said his surname properly. It actually means mountain oak in English, his surname. So that's why they named their cheese Mountain Oak cheese here in Canada. They emigrated from Holland, and they were award-winning cheesemakers back in the Netherlands. And they decided that there was a lot of encouragement from friends and family that they would start making cheese again. And I think they opened their doors in like 2012. And you can see in that top picture that his aging rooms are just incredible. This is a cheese maker that's located on the farm in New Hamburg, Ontario. My husband and I always stop there on our way to Stratford when we go to Stratford, which hasn't been for a year and a half or so, but they're lovely. They're always, they're open, 6 days a week. They're always closed on Sunday and holidays, but they're lovely. You can do a cheese tour. You can try their Goudas. They've got a whole range of aged Goudas. They have a Gouda Gold, which wins numerous awards every year. And interestingly, the gold stands for good old local dairy, not what gold, silver, bronze. It's good old local dairy. Anyway, Adam's a super fellow. He this year won the Grand Champion variety cheese with his cumin aged Gouda. So I talked to Jeremy to see if we could possibly get that. And he said, yes, we can put it in the boxes. Goudas are made in different ages, and then they're also often flavored. And historically, a lot of the spices would come from the Dutch colonies that had been conquered or whatever. And so Gouda was one of the first staples that was carried on ship journeys because it lasted so well. But this cumin aged Gouda is delightful. It's actually quite sweet. I did try it before the class. And with aged Goudas, you find that there are butterscotch notes that start to come, caramel notes, sweetness. And you'll see also in the paste, if you break it, that there are little crystals in there. And so when you try it, you can kind of feel a crunch in your teeth. I think it's a delightful cheese to try. Normally I wouldn't put another cheese after a flavored cheese, but I think we can kind of finish up with the blue cheese and nobody will be too offended, because this is quite it's a lovely flavor, and it's not too strong. Adam has, I think, 3 sons, and you'll see that son on the right works the farm with Adam, and that's his grandson. So they have beautiful Holstein cows. They grow all the feed for the cows on their land, and they make cheese, you know, basically every 6 days a week. So, and they basically, I remember Adam telling me this. There's from the milking parlor over to the cheese making facility, there's a pipe. And basically, because of the quota system in Canada, where farmers are protected, the price of their milk is protected. He milks his cow, and he has to buy that milk back from the quota system. So it's pretty wild. But he also introduced a robotic milking system a few years ago, which is, he says it's just crazy because the cows get on their own schedule. They come, they know when they need to be milked. They get a few little treats when they come in, and then it's incredible. He said to be able to actually, it's maybe not as hands-on obviously as it was in days gone by, but the robotic system is such that it can analyze the milk. It can figure out if the cow's running a fever. It knows exactly what it's eaten. It knows exactly, it's crazy. Anyway, it's not artificial intelligence. It's like super intelligence. So anyway, it's really changed the life for a lot of farmers that have these robotic systems. So I think I'd be interested to see if anybody found any crystals in the cheese. I think I did earlier when I tasted it, but that's something I always quite like with Goudas, because there's a little bit of treat. Oh, that's good. And you'll see on that bottom one on the left that you'll see how shiny the wax is.
Epson projector speaker.
But the
speaker
actually,
same as this.
Sorry, somebody's just come off of mute. Can you mute your mics, please? Thank you.
So you'll see the shininess to that bottom left Gouda. That's actually the fat coming out, weeping out through the wax. And you'll see on the aging shelves on the top left picture that those cheeses have to be washed, and the wax has to be cleaned off, and they have to be flipped so that they don't develop a kind of a slopiness to them or an indent. So they all, even if they're aged, 18 months or whatever, they have to be tended to all the time. So I think that's about it for the Gouda, unless there are any questions about Goudas in general. It is a brined cheese. They, yeah, my dog is, yeah. Somebody said their dog is really enthusiastic. My dog's upstairs in the bedroom with the door shut, because you should see her on Monday nights when we have cheese class, and there's like cheese on the table. It's bad. Move on then to the next slide, please, Helena. This is a favorite cheesemaker of mine. There we go. So Margaret Peters Morris is the lady down on the bottom right, and up on the top right, and that's Wilma, one of the other cheesemakers at the factory, and that's me in my youth about 6 years ago, I think. The Glengarry Fine Cheese is out towards Cornwall, just north of the 401. It's almost to the Quebec border, and the property that Margaret has her cheese making facility on is her ancient ancestral lands. It's down near the St. Lawrence River. She's also developed a cheese making supply company as well. So she supplies a lot of cheesemakers in North America with their starter cultures with their molds, with all kinds of wonderful kind of technical scientific things. She started making this Celtic blue. There's a cheese in Quebec called Bleu d'Elizabeth, which is made by Fromagerie du Presbytère. Amazing, lovely man, Jean Morin. He makes award-winning cheeses. And she decided she was going to make a cheese that would knock his cheese, Jean Morin's cheese, off the pedestal from always winning all the awards. And she did it. She developed this Celtic blue, and she entered the Celtic Blue Reserve in the American Cheese Society competition in 2015. It was in Providence, Rhode Island. I was actually there. There were about 10 of us from Canada that were there. And when she won the complete best in show, and there was like 1,800 cheeses entered in this competition, there was like a stunned silence in the auditorium. And then of course we went crazy, but everybody was kind of like, oh my God, a Canadian won at the American Cheese Society. That's just not right. Anyway, she is beloved by so many people because she's helped American cheesemakers, Canadian cheesemakers. Anyway, she stood up there on the stage and, you know, accepted it so beautifully. But it was stunning to see the American reaction. It really was. But anyway, she knocked the socks off Bleu d'Elizabeth by developing this cheese. So this cheese is aged about 2 to 3 months, and you'll see the kind of grooves on the rind that come from the form. She makes another cheese called Figaro as well, which is a soft, bloomy rind. Beautiful cheese. And she named it after what she flies to Europe, or she used to fly to Europe a lot to do cheese making courses, and she loved that paper and newspaper. So that was why she named that cheese Figaro. But anyway, this Celtic Blue is her well-known award-winning cheese. She started making it in the 1990s, and the wheel is not too big. It's 2.5 kilo wheel. I'll tell you a little bit about blue cheese. The cheesemaker takes the curds and they add Penicillium roqueforti to the curds. They call it seeding the curd, and then they make the cheese in a form, in a wheel shape, and it's still white. So what ends up happening is the cheesemaker will what's called pierce or needle the blue cheese, and you can see on the picture on the left of your screen, do you see those sort of vertical lines? That is where the needle has gone into the cheese, and once oxygen gets into the hole, it creates this blue veining that you see on the cheese. What else? I always find blue cheese is wonderfully delicious with honey. They're lovely with chocolate. And what else to say about blue cheese? Obviously, they're great with grapes as well. But this is a Holstein cow milk and award-winning. So she has European designed aging rooms, which are incredible. She used to teach cheese making courses. I've been to one of them over a long weekend years ago. Anyway, just a lovely woman. I know that I was down in Montreal years ago with my friend Jane Ross, and we stopped on the way in to pick up some Lancaster, which is her aged Gouda style cheese, and she gave us the grand tour, and we just had a wonderful time. So just a lovely woman. If you're ever out that way, just definitely stop in for cheese and stop in to just say hello. So that's the Celtic Blue Reserve. If there's any questions about blue cheeses, I'm happy to answer. Usually when I put together a cheese board, I'll have a blue cheese because I actually love blue cheese. But one of the things I always like to do is I like to elevate it a bit. I take it away from the other cheeses. I'll put it on a cake plate. Always when you're doing a board, have a different one knife for each cheese. Don't cross-pollinate knives with different cheeses. What else? It's always good to be like really kind of haphazard when you're setting up a board. So you'll see on this left picture, they've got dried oranges, dried pears. That's the other thing that goes really well with blue cheese. I dehydrate pear slices, and then I use that as a cracker rather than like the vessel for the cheese. Pears and blue cheese are amazing. Uh-oh, somebody's using the same knife. Well, it's okay if it's just you. But if you set out a board for you know, for at a party, if we ever have parties again, it's always good to have one knife per cheese. When I do cheese boards as well, or for large events, I tend to maybe I like to cut up the cheese so that it's sort of in a form that somebody can take a fork or take a pronged knife and take it and put it on their plate. If you don't start cutting into the wheel, people won't know what to do with it, or they'll destroy it. So it's always better to kind of prep it ahead of time in a way that they can just easily pick up the cheese from a board. And as I said, I like to intersperse chocolate, honey. I always put nuts kind of in a separate small bowl at the side in case there's any kind of worry about allergies. And then I often will dehydrate apple slices to have with cheddars, and pear slices to have with blue cheese, that sort of thing. But that's sort of how I set up my my boards. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer, or if I've missed any that have come through.
There was a question, Elisa, about how long cheese lasts.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe you could comment on, you know, how you store it and how long it lasts and so on.
So for tonight, for instance, the washed rind cheese, Le Bon Secret, the first one, wrap it in wax paper or parchment paper, and then just put it in a baggie in the fridge, or put it in a Tupperware container. Any cheese that doesn't have a rind, like a cheddar, for instance, some cheddars have rinds, cloth-bound rinds, but some don't. You can wrap that in saran. The other cheeses that for tonight, I would just wrap them in wax paper and then put them in a container in the fridge so that there's a little bit of air there. These cheeses, I would say, I wouldn't go longer than a week. Well, with the soft cheese, I wouldn't go longer than a week. The other cheeses, depending on if you wrap them in wax paper and then loosely wrap them with saran on top, or put them in a container in the fridge with some air, they should last longer than a week. Definitely. I always suggest don't buy too much cheese when you buy cheese. Just buy enough so that it doesn't go to waste. There's so much crazy work that goes into creating these cheeses, and if they're not stored properly or they're not handled properly at the store level, you never know, you know, what you're actually getting. But you kind of want to pay for what you're going to eat rather than pay for what you're going to throw out, if that makes sense. I actually, for the first time in about a year and a half since COVID, this course that I'm taking with George Brown, there's 4 of us. And so what we do is one person does the shop for the cheeses that we're tasting that week in the class. And my week was last week. My husband had to go downtown to pick up something in the office. He dropped me at the St. Lawrence Market. Oh my gosh, I felt like I was in France. It was so safe. There was nobody there. And it was just wonderful. I went from cheesemaker to there are like 4 or 5 cheese shops in the St. Lawrence. I got exactly what I needed. I got caught up with everybody. And it was just like the cheeses that are sitting there are just amazing. I wouldn't recommend going on a Saturday during COVID, but during the week, Tuesday through Friday, it's just, there's hardly anybody there. And it was just such a treat to do a cheese shop in, I felt like I was in France. It was just amazing. So, anyway.
There are a few additional questions here, Lisa. The first is, where can you buy a dehydrator? You had mentioned you would dehydrate pears and apples to go with the cheese. Is there a particular thing that you do, or a unit you can purchase to do that?
Well, it's funny. You can, when I first started doing it, I bought one from Home Hardware online. Like I just bought one, and that one is a small one. It's about, it's just an oval, and then it has about 5 plastic layers with kind of a mesh that you, I mandolin my apples and pears, and then I would do them that way. But I ended up buying an industrial dehydrator a few years ago, which has about 12 racks, and it would be like maybe twice the size of a bread maker. So it takes up a bit of room in the garage, I must say. But my husband always jokes when I start doing the pears for Christmas baskets and apples that the lights dim in North Toronto when my dehydrator starts. But yeah, so it depends on how much you're going to do, but you can also do it very, very easily in your oven. So for instance, I was, a friend of mine is an amazing baker, and she takes a pineapple and she cuts it very thinly with her knife, lays it out on parchment, 200 degrees for about 3 or 4 hours. And then the dehydrated pineapple at that point is kind of pretty dry. And when she pulls it out of the oven, she puts it into a muffin cup, like a muffin pan. And that makes the pineapple, the dried pineapple, looks like a flower. And then she decorates cakes with them. Like, it's crazy what people do, but that's just in the oven. So you could do pears, you could do apples on parchment, 200 degrees for 2 or 3 hours until they dry.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then we have, how can you tell when blue cheese turns bad visually? Are you able to do that visually?
Well, we always have these phrases: once it's gray, stay away. Anything fluorescent, never eat anything that has a fluorescent color to it. And some cheesemakers, some cheesemongers, I should say, some stores will have way too much supply, and you'll pick up something and it's bright yellow, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. But for blue cheese, so yeah, blue cheese, I always wrap it in wax paper and then put it in a baggie or put it in a container in the fridge with a bit of air. Blue cheese is not probably good after it starts to gray up and mold on the outside. Generally, we always say in the cheese world, do not freeze cheese, because it will change the texture. It will never come back to the right kind of consistency. But I remember reading years ago, Jamie Oliver said that, everybody has Stilton at Christmas time. And if you have any left over, slice it very thinly, lay it out on wax paper and layer it, freeze it, and then you can pull it out at any time. And I've actually tried this, it does work. You can pull it out at any time and sprinkle it, crumble it into salads, etc. So that's one cheese I would suggest not throwing out, but freezing.
Freezing. Oh, that's great. Okay. And last question is, are there any good cheese makers in the Kawartha area?
Not there's Back 40 Artisan cheese, which is sheep milk, and that's more over towards, but I'm not so clear Kawartha areas, but I would look up that one. There's a great cheese shop in Peterborough called Chasing the Cheese. Julie, I can't remember her last name. She's lovely. She's got amazing cheese. But in terms of cheesemakers, I think there's actually a herd of water buffalo up that way as well. So, but I'm not sure if they actually is, maybe I don't know if Sterling, Ontario is up that way, but there is water buffalo cheesemaker up that way, I think.
Neat. For bocconcini, like the big mozzarella, the buffalo mozzarella, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Back 40 would be probably the only one that I know over. And you know what? We'll get off this and I'll remember somebody right after. Sorry, but just kind of off the top of my head. I can't think of anybody other than Back 40 Artisan cheese.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, I'm just, I'm noticing the time. We've gone over time, but that's just because it's been wonderful, and we've been able to continue on and answer all our questions and all that. So anyway, I want to close off this evening by thanking all of our participants for being with us this evening. We're really pleased that you were able to join us. I hope that you'll watch for more Vic content in our Vic Express newsletter if you're a Vic alum, and through the University of Toronto Alumni Hub if you're joining us as a grad from another college of U of T or other faculty, etc. I would also like to thank my staff team, Helena Herskovisi and Alicia Lavalle, for their Zoom expertise and for coordinating this evening's event. And of course, a huge thanks to Lisa for sharing her expertise with us and her knowledge of cheese. I have been a cheese lover I think my whole life, and I've actually learned some important tips tonight, including the thing about putting a different knife for each cheese, because I've done the knife sharing thing too many times to count. So anyway, Lisa, we're just so grateful to you for joining us this morning. Thank you so much. The cheeses were amazing. And to all our participants, again, do be well, be safe, eat lots of cheese, and have a wonderful summer. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you. Good night.